So you've got your app running on Azure. Great. But what happens when you need global security, better performance, and enterprise grade security? That's where Azure Front Door comes in. In this video, we are going headfirst into setting up Azure Front Door from scratch. No lengthy theory, just hands on step by step implementation. By the end, you'll not only have AFD up and running, but also understand how it improves performance, routing, and security for your app. If you already have an app on Azure, you are ready to follow along. If not, I've got a quick 15-minute video that walks you through deploying one, completely optional. Let's dive right in and get Azure Front Door set up in the best way possible. So first off, I want to introduce you to my subscription setup or the resources that I have already set up on my subscription. Particularly all the resources that are existing are under the resource group my profile -rg, and I want to take some time to explore through it, walk through it. We will be adding Azure Front Door in this resource group itself. So if I go into resource group, there's only one that exists in my subscription and it has four resources right now. The one we are interested in is app service, which is basically the web application that's running on an URL, public facing URL, and the register containers are the container registries are the ones that we are using to make our deployments and connect it or hook it up with our web application. App service plan is something that is used to manage our app service, as in the backup, the scaling, and everything. More on it, you can watch my previous video where we set up this resource group in the first place, but that's not what we are here for. Let's just take a look at the web app that we have, and then we can start working on integrating the Azure Front Door with that or with this web app. So let's browse this app. So when I click on browse, it lands up on a new tab with the URL as https:/aditya some grade with the location as Australia East in the URL itself, followed by azurewebsites.net. That's the public URL that I am getting for free when I set up my web application. So that is the one thing that I want to focus on, because now we will be moving this to Azure Front Door. So right now the only way to access this application on World Wide Web publicly is to hit this URL. And other than that, this app or this web page is very basic. It says welcome to my profile and talks about my profile, just like an online CV or something. But that's just for testing purpose, the app that we have. So now let's move back to Azure portal and try creating the Azure Front Door resource. I can do that in create resource and search front door and CDN profiles. I'm going to choose the offering by Microsoft, click on create. Over here I have a couple of options, either quick create or custom create. I'm gonna stick with quick create because then we can anyway make the changes in the properties once the resource has been created. The create button is right there on the bottom left. It's not on visible on the screen share, but it's there. So I'm gonna click that, and we have an error which says that our subscription does not has Microsoft.cdn registered, and we can click on learn more to learn more, but what it essentially says is to follow a couple of steps. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to my subscription, select my subscription. Over there I'm going to look for resource providers. That's there in settings. So over here we want to first let it load and then look for Microsoft.cdn. I can't see that, so I'll search it out. And this is the thing that's not registered on our subscription. We have the versions, the preview one, the stable ones. I'm not gonna select something in particular, but I'm simply going to click on register button and make it registered to our subscription. Now let's redo the creation process for Azure Front Door since now we have the Microsoft.cd and registered to our subscription. So I'm gonna go to Home, create a resource, Front Door and CD and Profiles, and not CNS but CDN. Now I'll just click on this and click on Create, Quick Create. And right now we are not seeing the error. We can now select our resource group, and now we need a name. Let's call it Front Door. Standard or premium? Let's stick with standard to keep it budget friendly on my subscription right now. For endpoint name, again Front Door, and then it's going to create an endpoint host name followed by a GUID. Origin type, you can select whatever resource on your subscription that you want to connect it with. It could be an IP address, it could be uh, any of these options. Also, we have an option for custom, but right now I'm going to select app services as is the case with our resource group right now. So when I do select app services, it's going to show up in the origin hostname as my existing app service, which is aditya-guide Australia East Azure Websites.net. Then we have an option to enable caching, which is basically will enable the caching on the Azure Front Door edge Azure Front Doors. So there's a concept of edge and then origin group. Uh, Edge is like the instance of Azure Front Door that is nearest to the client. So if I enable caching, what is essentially going to happen is for the first time when the client makes a request to our API, Azure Front Door will direct it to the origin group, and that's like the connection to edge Azure Front Door is very fast, but then the next connection from Azure Front Door to origin group will depend on how far the origin group is. But if you enable caching and that client again makes a connection makes a call that's a repeated instance, this time Azure Front Door will return the data from its cache and not actually reaching back to the origin group. So that's that. Right now we are going to keep it disabled, but really helpful in keeping a good client side experience with low latency responses. WAF policies we'll ignore for now, that's a different story. Next on tags and then review and create. I'll skip this. Once the validation is completed, you can click on create, that will trigger the deployment. The buttons are on the bottom and unfortunately I'm not able to show it on the screen share. My apologies, but I'll also skip the deployment. So it's done now. And now that our app is deployed, we can go to resource. That lands us on the overview page of the resource Front Door. We'll get to the overview later. First, let's check out by expanding settings and security. So in security, we have secrets and identity. In identity, we can switch on system assigned identity, which will give us an object ID assigned, which makes sense to AAD, and we can use that to authorize and authenticate Azure Front Door to various places by whitelisting this object ID. However, in this tutorial, we are not going to use it with our web app service. But if you're interested in how to make use of it, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to help you out. So on the overview, we have some standard information about our front door, the subscription resource group where it lies in. But most importantly, we have the endpoint host name. And if I copy paste it here on a new tab, we'll see that it lands us on our application with endpoint being front door -quid. So at first we have a couple of options that are seemingly a bit alien: domains, origin groups, rule sets, and front door manager. Well, they are very straightforward once you get the hold of the concepts. So let's do that here for a while. what's happening is user is talking to the browser and the browser is making the touch with AFD, and then AFD is connecting the browser to the origin groups. That's the very top level view of what's happening. Let's take a deeper look at what's happening. So when we take a deeper look, what's essentially happening is user hits an endpoint, and then that endpoint directs it to AFD, which is sitting on the edge, and then that endpoint will have a route like myendpoint.com/storage/API/app, and the Azure Front Door is able to pick the routes, apply a set of rules on it, and based on the route, it has the power to connect it with resources in origin group. So if someone is hitting myendpoint.com/storage, AFD has the capacity or capability to connect it to the storage resource in the origin group. If someone is hitting /API, it will connect it to the API app that's defined in the origin group. And if someone is putting /app, it will connect it to the app and the web app will launch up. So that's the power of origin groups. And we can have multiple origin groups. We'll look into it later, but that's there. And then we have rules, as in when the request is flowing from AFD to the origin group, we can modify, filter out, add or remove information from the request or the response as it flows from AFD to origin group and origin group to AFD back. And these rules will be applied on the AFD layer itself. So that's theoretically what's there. Let's take a look practically on the portal, Azure portal, in the resource AFD, how we can set these up and make sense out of it and patch it up all together. So back to the portal, we are in the front door manager in settings, and over here we have the default route setup, which was created at the time we did a quick creation on our resource. Default route is mapping the endpoint front doors hyphen GUID with the, so it's mapping the endpoint of front door hyphen GUID that was created for front door with our app service that is running as Aditya hyphen something. So that's what it's doing. That's what we have default origin group as. So its status is enabled, it's provisioned, and it has one selected domain. So that's the domain for front door endpoint. And then we can always create custom domains. Like if I have a domain on my name on DNS, then I should be able to use it. Like if I have www.addosh.com on my name, I should be able to map it with my Azure Front Door. And there's a procedure. How do you prove that it's on your name and then associate it? Maybe a different video on it. Let me know in the comments. But that custom domain part we'll skip for this video. So now let's explore the origin groups on the portal. So the default origin group has one associated endpoint right now, and that's the front door endpoint. And if we click on it, it will open up the flyout details flyout, and that will have the detailed information about the features that are enabled and the features that we can enable. So over here, I want to focus first on, as the origin host name is single one, that's the Aditya app. So that's the origin host name, the only host name. We can have multiple here. So this is essentially the my profile app that's running, and it's on Australia East server. Let's say in future I want to have a backup app running in Indian server. So then we have Australia East and India, and then maybe another server that's running in Europe. And then there is a client from Europe. Which server does he get connected to? How do AFD configure that, and how do we configure AFD to do what we wish to do? So that's the thing that we have all on this page. First off, we have session affinity, which means if I click on or check this, what will happen is, let's say I am the client, I am sitting in India and I connected to the Indian server. Throughout the session, since that browser is active, my all the calls or all the subsequent requests will have the affinity for that session to always hit Indian server no matter what happens in the world. So that's what session affinity is. As long as my session is active, the server does not change by Azure Front Door. Now you need it at times when you have like local caches on your system. So while the session is active, you do not want to switch the servers because then caches will get messed up and the experience on the user will get messed up. But if there's not that, if your system is stateless, you can hit any server whichever is available at the lowest latency and has the least traffic and most availability. Also, back to origin host name, we have priority as 1. We can edit it to have priority as 1, 2, 3. So if I have 3 servers and the priority of one is 1 and the other one is 2, that means always, always, always the calls will go to the server which is, or the origin name which is associated with lower priority. And if it is not available, only then the second priority or the larger priority will be checked upon. But usually we would keep the priority as same for multiple origin names, and in that scenario what will happen is it will rely on latency. So the origin name with the least latency when the priority is same will get picked up, and we set the latency sensitivity at the very bottom. So right now by default it is 50 milliseconds. So if there are two servers with the same priority and one server is have the response time of X and the other server has response time of X minus 50 or greater than 50, the other server will be picked over because it's considered faster. But when the latency is less than the range of or differ less than by 50 milliseconds, then both the servers are considered to be having the same latency because sensitivity unit is 50 milliseconds. So anything less than 50 milliseconds will be considered same. So when two servers have same priority and latency less than the sensitivity value, they will be considered as equally uh, as as per se equal in all measures. So which one to decide when these two are available? So for that, we then rely on weight that we are assigning. So if the weight associated with one is 1000, and let's say the other origin that I add, which is an India server, has the weight of 9000, that means when the priority of both the servers are same and when the latency is within the latency sensitivity, the requests will get get distributed over these two origins on a ratio of 9 is to 1, because weight of Australia East is 1000, India is 9000. That means uh, 9 out of 10 requests will land on India because it's going to essentially be the ratio, and 1 out of 10 will land on Australia. That's the significance of weight. It comes into picture only when priority is same between the origin names and the latency is within the latency sensitivity. So the order you've got it: priority, latency, and then weight. And we know how they all come into picture or act together one by one in the flow. And lastly, we have health probes. When you enable health probes, it is going to hit the path slash, it's basically right now going to hit front door, the endpoint as it is, because there is nothing followed by slash on the path, but you can add it some slash ping slash some path, basically that returns status code of okay or something from your app service, so that it just knows it's alive. Right now it is going to keep hitting the home URL, and if the response is not getting back, it will consider that the service is down, the health is bad, or else the health is up. So that's how it's monitoring the health of origin host names. So let's say I have 3 origin hosts: Australia East, India, and one for Europe. It will keep pinging them at an interval of 100 seconds, as I've mentioned on the last line. So each 100 second, each Azure Front Door Edge instance will keep pinging these 3 origin names to origin host names to ensure that they are alive. And if they are in a degraded state, it will stop sending all the traffic to it by itself and rely on the ones that are in healthy state. And so uh, when I'm saying 100, every 100 seconds one request will be sent, so there will be hundreds of Azure Front Door on different locations on edge computing, edge cloud. So all these Azure Front Doors will be sending one request every 100 seconds. So that will be like not just one request will be coming every 100 seconds, but it will be one request coming from hundreds of Azure Front Door located on the cloud, edge cloud. So that is also important that you understand that there's going to be more than one request coming on the origin names per 100 seconds, because there are more than one Azure Front Doors. There are hundreds of them. And lastly, I want to show you the rule sets that we have. We simply create a rule set name. Let's call it redirects Google. So this rule set is going to just redirect the URL to Google. And in order to do that, we can select all the properties of the request that we want to put a check on or process. Right now, we have these many options. I'm going to select request URL, and the condition I am selecting as if, and operator is contains. So we can select any, but let's stick with contains. Then value edit. If URL contains front door, which it definitely will because our endpoint name is front door hyphen. What we want to do is, so here's our front door. What we want to do is redirect the URL. So URL redirect, and let's do temporary redirect. We have options of found, move, permanent redirect. Let's stick with temporary redirect to HTTPS protocol, and destination of redirection will be www.google.com. So essentially what will happen is whenever someone hits the Azure Front Door endpoint which contains front door in it, it should be something usually after some string from query params, but we are selecting the root only just to validate. It will get redirected to google.com. Also, I need to give a name here, so let's call it redirects always as the rule. Now when I click on create rule set, it will take a few seconds to create it. Once the rule set is ready, I just need to open the default route in the Azure Front Door Manager and scroll down all the way to the bottom where there's an option for rule set. Now the UI is not very great, but if you'll scroll, you'll find your rule set redirects Google. I can apply it to this default origin group, the default route that we have associated with it. Also, we can create multiple routes. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. We can do a separate video on that. But this is the default route to which we are right now associating our rule that we created. Once that's done, what we can do is we can try hitting the endpoint for the front door, copy and paste. And what happens is it opens Google. So it's basically contains front door in its name, and it's being redirected by the AFD at the AFD Cloud Edge. And that wraps up our step-by-step guide to setting up and configuring Azure Front Door. Now you have a fully optimized, secure and globally available web application. If you found this tutorial helpful, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps the channel. Got questions or need further clarifications? Drop them in the comments and I'll be happy to help. Also, if you're serious about mastering Azure, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next one. Happy coding!